Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. Now, Godzilla and Kong are about to have an epic team up in Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, so we're going to recap everything that has happened in the Monsterverse so far. We're also going to explain all the Titans, the Hollow Earth, and everything else. So here's everything you need to know about the Monsterverse.
You are going to tell me everything I don't know, or I'm going to blow your head off.
Monsters exist.
Okay, so we're going to start with the ancient history of this universe. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the world was ruled by Titans. They are gigantic monsters that predate humanity, and it's believed that they all originated from the Hollow Earth. It's a giant subterranean ecosystem deep inside the Earth, close to the core. There's a lot of radiation down there, which is the reason why the Titans are so big. In the Monsterverse, the Titans feed on radiation by absorbing it. At some point, in very ancient times, the Titanus Gojirus became the dominant apex predator on Earth, and that is, of course, Godzilla. Godzilla is a force of balance that keeps all the Titans in check, making sure that they don't overpopulate or take over the world. This is why Godzilla is the king of the monsters. During those ancient times, humanity was aware of the Titans, whom they worshipped as gods. At some point, radiation on the surface of the planet subsided. On top of that, many cataclysmic events forced the Titans to go into deep hibernation. The Titans remained dormant up until World War II. Humans started using atomic bombs, and the spike in radiation drew the Titans back to the surface.
We thought we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world.
So it's all Oppenheimer's fault again. The first recorded incident involving a Titan in the modern day happened in 1943, when the USS Lawton was attacked and sunk by an ion dragon. In 1944, an American pilot named Hank Marlowe crash lands on Skull Island. He and a Japanese fighter try to kill each other because it's World War II, but their fight is stopped by Kong. There was a war between the Gojiras and the Kongs. Godzilla Species 1 and the Kongs were kicked out from the Hollow Earth and they moved to Skull Island. The island is an extension of Hollow Earth because there are pockets on the surface that connect to the world down below. On Skull Island, the Kongs became the protectors of the human inhabitants. However, most of them were killed by the Skull Crawlers. One Kong survived, King Kong, and he became the protector of the island and its inhabitants. This brings us up to the events of the prequel show, Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. So, in 1952, a military officer named Lee Shaw, played by the MCU's own Wyatt Russell, meets Keiko, a scientist who studies monsters and unexplained events. Lee's job is to escort her while she tracks down an unexplained spike of radiation in the Philippines. While in the jungle, they stumble across Bill Randa, who's following the same spike. However, instead of using scientific equipment, he's using myth and folktales.
I'm a cryptozoologist.
You're a cryptozoo, what?
Studies animals that don't exist.
Together, they find the ship, the USS Lawton, a ship that went down near Hawaii, but inexplicably ended up on land in the Philippines. Bill was actually on the ship when it was attacked in 1943, and he is the only survivor. On the ship, a Titan called the Ion Dragon attacks them. They escape, and from that point on, the three are inseparable. In 1954, a U.S. nuclear submarine dives into the lower depths of the ocean. This awakens Godzilla from his slumber after sensing the nuclear power source. Later that year, Team Monarch discovered a footprint belonging to Godzilla in Indonesia. They show an impression of it to General Puckett, Lee's superior officer. He demands more proof, so they devise a plan to lure Godzilla to the Bikini Atoll using an atomic bomb. However, the US military never planned to study him and instead tried to kill him in the blast. Keiko's heart was broken over the loss, but Godzilla's appearance convinced the US government that they should study monsters. Monarch, a scientific organization that studies massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, is formed. In 1955, there's a massive radiation spike on Hataruma, an island off the coast of Japan. Bill and Keiko go to investigate, but Lee remains behind to deliver a budget proposal to the US government. Keiko and Bill meet Dr. Suzuki, who created a machine that simulates gamma radiation to lure monsters. Lee ditches the budget proposal to go to Hataruma because he's in love with Keiko and he can't bear the thought of her in danger. The gamma ray simulator flies out of the water and Godzilla emerges bigger than ever before. Not only did he survive the atom bomb, but he actually became stronger because of the radiation.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
The trio get back to DC and General Puckett replaces Lee since he ditched the budget meeting. The three create a map of everything they've seen to save their jobs. And while creating it, Bill Randa comes up with the Hollow Earth theory.
Bigger on the inside.
He runs to tell Keiko and discovers that she has a child named Hiroshi that she has kept a secret because of the stigma around widows. Oh, and Lee tells Puckett that they saw Godzilla again and he lets them all keep their jobs.
You're fired!
Chief, the planetarium party.
Oh, right. You're unfired. I need you. Come here.
And then we cut to 1959. Since Lee and Keiko broke up, Bill and Keiko are now married and raising Hiroshi as their own. The trio is hunting down a monster in a nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan. Now, in the center of the defunct reactor, there are all these eggs. Now, of course, they hatch right as they're getting samples. They try to escape, but Keiko falls into the pit. We jump forward 3 years to 1962. Lee Shaw is preparing for an expedition to Hollow Earth and says goodbye to Lil Hiroshi, who's now under Bill Randa's care. They manage to open a tunnel to Hollow Earth by using the gamma ray simulator, but the vortex is too strong. The mission crew falls in and they disappear. Monarch's defunded after this catastrophic failure, and Bill Randa is obsessed with Hollow Earth and finding Lee.
I spent the last 30 years trying to prove the truth of what I learned that day.
So then, we fast forward to 1972 in the events of Kong Skull Island. We open on Bill Randa, aged and now played by John Goodman. Bill spots the mythical island, Skull Island, on a satellite and plans an expedition piggybacking on the last US military forces left in Vietnam. And then we get what can only be described as a Marvel-class reunion. He recruits James Conrad, a British Special Air Service captain played by Tom Hiddleston, Lieutenant Packard played by Samuel L. Jackson, and Mason Weaver, a war photographer played by Brie Larson.
The gang's all here.
They get to Skull Island and set off seismic charges to determine if the island might have another passage to Hollow Earth. But they're interrupted when they find Kong, who's really mad that they've invaded his island.
We just got taken down by a monkey the size of a building.
Yeah. That was an unconventional encounter.
The group is split into two, one half with the militaristic Lieutenant Packard and the other half with James Conrad. Conrad's group runs into Hank Marlowe, who has survived all these years and is now living with the Iwi tribe. He tells them that Kong is actually a benevolent creature on the island, that he keeps the real threat, the skull crawlers, in line.
But I call them skull crawlers. Why? Because it sounds neat.
They build a boat out of parts from Marlowe's downed plane and reconnect with Lieutenant Packard's group. Packard forces them all to go searching for one of his missing men, and then they cross through a toxic mass grave created by the skull crawlers. Bill Randa accidentally attracts a skull crawler and he gets devoured by it, but not before making this video for his son, Hiroshi.
But maybe I could leave something for the future. A legacy.
This is actually the recording that opens Legacy of Monsters. And then Conrad goes all Zack Snyder on the monsters. Packard wants to kill Kong for revenge, even though he is the only thing keeping the Skullcrawlers in check. Conrad and Weaver come face to face with Kong, and they see that he's pretty cool, so they decide to save him. Packard injures Kong with napalm, and of course, a giant Skullcrawler emerges from underground.
That's the big one.
Packard still wants to kill Kong, but then...
Die, you motherfucker.
Kong and the Skullcrawler fight, and with the humans' help, Kong wins the fight like a badass. Afterwards, the humans leave the island, and Kong gives them a goodbye roar. The movie ends with Mason and Conrad in a Monarch detention facility where they discover that Kong isn't the only monster out there. Also, Marlowe reunites with his wife and son. We skip 10 years to 1982 where Lee Shaw escapes Hollow Earth. Even though he's been there for 20 years, he does not look a day older. He's kept in a Monarch hospital where he reunites with Hiroshi. He's all grown up and followed in his father's footsteps and is now the head of Monarch. Shaw tries to explain that Bill was right about everything, but Hiroshi refuses to listen and locks him up in a Monarch nursing home.
Not a nursing home. How many times do I gotta say this? It's a retirement community.
In 1999, Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, a scientist who works for Monarch, discovered 2 Mudo eggs, but one of them has hatched. The Mudos are the parasitic monsters that reproduce by laying their eggs inside the bodies of Gojiras. The creature heads straight to the nearest source of radiation, a nuclear power plant in Japan, and causes a nuclear meltdown. He eventually creates a cocoon in the reactor where Monarch monitors him for nearly 2 decades. Joseph Brody lost his wife Sandra during the Mudos attack, and he becomes obsessed with proving that the meltdown was not an accident.
You're lying, because what's really happening is that you're hiding something out there.
In 2012, Cora Mateo starts working for a tech company called AET. She discovers a program called the Cybernetic Unit. When she investigates, she discovers that AET and Monarch are performing illegal experiments on animals, so she writes a code to corrupt all the research and flees to Japan. She then changes her name to May. In Japan, she meets Kentaro, Hiroshi Randa's son and Bill Randa's grandson. In 2013, the research Bill Randa threw into the ocean is found by a Japanese trawler boat. In 2014, Ford Brody, Joseph's son, returns to his family in San Francisco. But then he has to bail out his dad, who was arrested in Japan after he tries to illegally find proof about what really happened all those years ago. Ford and Joe investigate their hometown and discover that it's all a Monarch cover-up to hide a Mudo egg inside the power plant. And just on cue, the Mudo emerges and kills most of the Monarch staff. Joseph is injured during the attack and he later dies.
They killed Walter White before he even got to fight Godzilla?
I know, it's such a big waste.
What are we building? You said it yourself. A robot?
I am the one who knocks.
The Mudo attacks a Russian nuclear submarine and then he wreaks havoc on Honolulu. That is, until Godzilla arrives. When emerging, Godzilla causes a tsunami. Godzilla fights the Muto for a bit, but the Muto retreats away. On the ground, Monarch scientist Dr. Suzuki realizes that the Muto is trying to get back to the other egg, which is stored in a nuclear containment facility in Las Vegas. Before they can intercept the egg, though, a second Muto hatches and destroys the Las Vegas Strip. All three monsters are tracking towards San Francisco. The military creates a plan to use a nuke to draw them into the ocean and kill them all at once, but the plan fails when the male Muto takes the nuke and gives it to the female to eat. The female lays eggs near Chinatown, and Godzilla emerges off the San Francisco coast, destroying the Golden Gate Bridge while en route to the Mutos. And then Serizawa comes up with Plan B.
Let them fight.
Godzilla clashes with the Mutos, but their combined forces overwhelm him. Ford, who's still around, comes back to the city to rescue his wife and son. He joins a team on an epic halo jump. Just as the Mutos are about to kill Godzilla, Ford blows up their nest, and the explosion draws them away. The Muto is about to kill Ford, but then Godzilla unleashes his atomic blast. Godzilla kills both the Mutos, first by crushing the flying one, and then Godzilla straight up fatalities the other one.
Fatality.
After the battle, Godzilla disappears into the ocean. And everybody cheers for him, even though he just, destroyed their city. Cut to 2015, and we meet Kate Randa, another one of Hiroshi Randa's children. She was actually in San Francisco the day of the attack. Oh, and they've dubbed the attack G-Day. She's headed to Japan to collect her father's things after he disappeared. She meets Kentaro and Emiko Randa. Yep, Hiroshi had a whole second family. The two dig through their father's office for answers and discover top-secret Monarch files. Kentaro brings them to Mei, who helps decode them. Monarch gets an alert that the files were opened, and agents Tim and Duvall go to Tokyo to find the Randas. Monarch tries to take the files from Kentaro, but he flees. He tells Kate and Mei that he found someone in the files who could help them, Lee Shaw. They go to the Monarch nursing home and meet Lee. Lee tells them that Monarch is actually super sketchy, so they help a mistake and go to the last place Hiroshi was seen, Alaska. In Alaska, they find a camp with signs of their father, but then another Muto shows up. They flee and almost die in the Alaskan wilderness until Kentaro finds an old radio satellite station. He radios for help, and Monarch saves them. Monarch lets Kate, Kentaro, and Mei go, and Shaw escapes with some inside help.
Another Titan emergence is coming. You think you know how to stop it, but Monarch disagrees.
They've known everything for years. I've been telling them. They just don't believe it.
After they find a map in Hiroshi's San Francisco office, they all head to Tindouf, Algeria. They finally find Hiroshi, but he is in the middle of using a gamma ray simulator. Godzilla shows up, causes some havoc, and then calmly goes back into the desert.
Please go away. Let me sleep for the love of God!
The group splits. Shaw tracks Godzilla while Kate, Kentaro, and Mei leave to find Hiroshi. Now, remember that tech company AET that I mentioned a while back? Well, they find out where Mei is and kidnap her from Algeria. Kate and Kentaro find that Monarch agent Tim and agree to help him if he helps them find Mei. They trigger a Titan alert to free Mei, but eventually Monarch negotiates her release with AET. Now, because of that Titan alert, though, Monarch also goes public, and AET rebrands to Apex, the same tech company that we're going to see in Godzilla vs. Kong. Shaw decides to destroy every tunnel to Hollow Earth and heads back to Kazakhstan where Keiko died.
Well, I love what they've done to the place.
Monarch and the trio follow him there. Shaw blows up the rift, but in the explosion, Kate, Mei, and him all fall into the tunnel. They wake up in the Axis Mundi, a level of Hollow Earth that distorts time. This is where Shaw ended up all those years ago. They find Keiko, who also fell in 70 years ago, but looks to be the exact same age. Back on Earth, Kentaro, Hiroshi, and Tim partner with Apex to rescue Kate, Mei, and Shaw. In the Axis Mundi, they find the old pod that Shaw originally arrived in and retrofit it to help them escape. The radiation attracts the Ion Dragon, who disconnects one of the cables. Shaw hops out to fix it and dies while doing so. Godzilla appears and kills the Ion Dragon, and Kate, Mei, and Keiko all escape. They land on Skull Island, where Apex now has an outpost. Even though it's only been 2 days for them, it's actually been 2 years on the surface. They all reunite, and the series ends with a classic Kong roar. In 2019, in a Monarch facility, Emma Russell and her daughter Madison awaken Mothra and use a machine called the Orca to calm her down. Mothra is a benevolent Titan who's actually kind to humans. When Mothra lays an egg, she will be reborn from it after her current body dies.
Oh, she's like the Phoenix.
Very good, high five. But then they're attacked by eco-terrorists who are led by Alan Jonah. They take them hostage and steal Orca. But in truth, Emma is actually working with the terrorists.
What?
Her son died on G-Day, and after that, she came up with a plan to use the Titans. Emma wants to reawaken all the Titans on Earth.
That seems like a real bad plan.
Well, Emma's sort of done with the human race, and she believes the Titans can stop climate change. When all the Titans return to the surface, they will terraform the planet and restore it to its natural form.
Human beings are a disease, and we are
the cure.
Meanwhile, in Washington, Monarch is on trial. The government wants to incorporate them into the military, who would kill all Titans. In the middle of the hearing, they find out that Dr. Russell was taken and Godzilla is following the Orca device. Monarch team up with Russell's ex-husband, Mark, to find Emma and Madison. In Antarctica, Russell releases the biggest Titan of all, Monster Zero, aka King Ghidorah. But the bad guys fail to realize that Ghidorah is an evil alien Titan who disrupts the natural order, and he just wants to kill Godzilla and become the new king. Godzilla and Ghidorah fought in ancient times, and the alien three-headed Titan was buried under the ice in Antarctica. Ghidorah starts killing everyone, but then Godzilla shows up. The Titans clash in an epic fight, but Ghidorah blasts Godzilla and flies away. Dr. Russell heads to Mexico and releases Rodan, who attracts both King Ghidorah and Godzilla. The scene where Rodan awakens from a volcano is really epic. Rodan levels the city simply by flying over it. Ghidorah defeats Rodan, and then Godzilla fights him again. Godzilla bites off one of Ghidorah's heads, and it instantly regrows.
They cut off one head. Two more shall take its place.
The military blasts the Titans with a prototype weapon that presumably kills Godzilla. The king is dead. Long live the new king, Ghidorah. He starts awakening all the Titans around the world, and most of them accept him as their new apex predator. On Skull Island, Kong decides to ignore Ghidorah's call, and he makes sure no other monster leaves the island either. Mothra also rejects the new king, and she remains loyal to her husband?
So her and Godzilla, they got a thing going on?
But it's not really romantic, it's more of a symbiosis type thing where they rely on each other to protect the world. Madison is horrified by her mother's actions and she runs away. Emma then realizes that Ghidorah is evil, so she turns on Jonah, who lets her go. Monarch discovers that Godzilla is alive, and with Mothra's help, they track him to an underwater city in Hollow Earth. Godzilla needs a serious boost of radiation, so Serizawa sacrifices himself by detonating a nuke to restore Godzilla. In Boston, Madison tries to use the Orca to calm down the Titans, but she accidentally summons Ghidorah. Godzilla and Mothra team up, and we get an epic clash of the Titans. Mark and Emma reunite, and they save Madison. Emma dies after sacrificing herself to save her family. Mothra defeats Rodan and then sacrifices herself to save Godzilla.
Best Titan wife ever.
She sure is, because her energy supercharges Godzilla. Godzilla goes nuclear and literally kills Ghidorah and his three stupid heads.
You come at the king, you best not miss.
Afterward, all the Titans kneel before Godzilla as he takes his rightful place as king of the monsters. The end credits show news articles that Titans are healing the planet, and many Titans are making their way to Skull Island as it grows unstable. In the post-credit scene, Jonah buys one of Ghidorah's heads.
We'll take it.
Then we fast forward 5 more years to Godzilla vs. Kong. So there was always an endless storm around Skull Island, but then Ghidorah's in 2019 merges with the storm barrier and it makes the island unstable. By 2024, Monarch has built a giant dome facility that simulates the island to contain Kong. Kong befriended a deaf girl from the Iwi tribe called Gia, who can communicate with him through sign language. She's the adopted daughter of Eileen Andrews, who's researching Kong for Monarch. At the same time, Godzilla has been defeating Titans all over the world. He then attacks an Apex facility in Florida for seemingly no reason.
But he attacked for a reason, right?
Yes, Godzilla goes berserk because Apex is using one of Ghidorah's heads to control Mechagodzilla.
To fight monsters, we created monsters of our own.
And this is the reason why Godzilla goes crazy. An Apex employee and the host of a conspiracy podcast, Bernie Hayes, discovers some of it during Godzilla's attack. Ren Serizawa, the son of Ishiro Serizawa, is controlling Mechagodzilla telepathically. But Apex needs a power source for their mech, and this is why they need to gain access to Hollow Earth. Apex develops special vehicles that can withstand the strong gravitational force of Hollow Earth, so they can travel into the world that's under the world. They hire Nathan Lind, a former Monarch scientist, to lead the expedition. Nathan meets up with Monarch on Skull Island, and they transport Kong to Antarctica so he will guide them into Hollow Earth. But during the trip, Godzilla attacks Kong, and the two have an awesome fight.
Wait, why did Godzilla attack Kong?
Well, first, Godzilla's kind of crazy because he senses Ghidorah. And second, Kong is another alpha predator, and he isn't supposed to leave Skull Island.
Stay out of my territory.
And according to the lore, Godzilla has this primal drive to protect the balance on Earth no matter what. And thirdly, Godzilla is kind of a dick in this movie. Godzilla nearly kills Kong, but the humans trick him and save Kong. Afterwards, the human airlifts Kong to the rift in Antarctica, and then Kong guides them into Hollow Earth. Now, while all of that is happening, Madison Russell teams up with Bernie and Josh Valentine to prove Godzilla's innocence, and they uncover Apex's conspiracy. In Hollow Earth, Kong arrives in a throne room made for his kind, and remnants of past battles with Godzilla's species. Kong finds an axe that can withstand Godzilla's blast and even pierce his skin. So, it's his Stormbreaker. The Apex team sends energy readings back to Earth to power Mechagodzilla. This attracts Godzilla to Hong Kong and he drills straight down into Hollow Earth. And then Godzilla and Kong have an epic showdown. Godzilla is way too powerful, but Kong uses his new axe to defeat Godzilla.
Or so it's like Batman versus Superman.
Exactly. The axe is basically the kryptonite spear.
Save Martha!
Anyways, immediately after this fight, Godzilla and Kong have a rematch. But without the axe, Godzilla defeats Kong and then makes it clear who's the king around these parts.
King Kong ain't got shit on me!
Ghidorah's consciousness takes over Mechagodzilla, killing all the Apex baddies, and he starts rampaging. Godzilla goes to fight him, but he gets his ass kicked. The humans revive Kong, and he saves Godzilla. And then we get a Titan-sized team-up as Kong and Godzilla join forces against Mechagodzilla. During the fight, Madison and her friends do their part and sabotage the robot from the Apex facility. Godzilla powers up Kong's axe, and he chops Mechagodzilla into pieces. Titans save the world. Let's just ignore that they just leveled one of the most densely populated cities on the planet. There's one last face-off, but they acknowledge each other and Godzilla leaves. He returns to his home and Kong becomes the ruler of Hollow Earth.
So now that there are mechs in the world, we're about to get a Pacific Rim crossover, right?
Oh, that would be freaking awesome, and I do hope something like that happens.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Guys, that's everything you need to know about the Monsterverse before watching Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. Big shout out to the writer of this video, Brianna McLarty, and Pavel T. You can find their social links below. So guys, let me know what you think of the recap. Anything we left out? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.